Well, hello house lovers and welcome to the lovely Bonaccord house. But before we go inside, let's take a turn about the shrubbery and pick some peas. Yes, house lovers, the pea mulch that I spread has borne fruit. Literally fruit. Lots of peas have shot up and they've all flowered and they've all got baby peas. So I'm going to pick some and see if they won't work in tonight's salad. And here is my fabulous harvest of fresh baby peas. But now let us go inside and see just what I've been up to. And what I was up to involved starting the generator and stripping the partition. Yes, house lovers, here we are. I charged up the heat gun and went for it, as you can see. Now, it might not look as though I've done much, but in fact, this took me about 3 hours, largely because there are so many layers of paint. And the very last layer, which is a little bit scorched, you can still see because it's still clinging to it, is probably an animal-based shellac that was, I imagine, applied to the pine to make it look like a more expensive timber. And it's very sticky and very unpleasant, and it burns very easily. It's a bit like toffee, as you can see. So the scorching is just the leftovers of that early shellac, in case you're thinking, I've nearly burnt the place down. But two friends did point out that obviously with a heat gun, there are, let's just say, issues about safety. And so to that end, not only did I have the old fire escapes from Bonaccord's boarding house days, but I also had a bucket of water because, as two friends pointed out, a friend of mine was heat gunning some skirting boards and he didn't realize that packed behind it, since the Victorian era, when the skirting boards were put in place, they had been packed with newspaper. And the minute you point a heat gun at it, so he had a problem. And another friend was working on some vintage railway carriages when some of the flakes of paint smoldered and ended up burning the wooden railway carriage completely to the ground overnight. So I was a little anxious about preventing that. Luckily, at Bonaccord, as we know, the skirting boards are all made of cement, and I was able to liberally splash around water to make sure that nothing caught on fire. As you can see, it's a fairly tedious task. The first thing was, of course, cranking up the generator, always fun. But what I did learn was it tends to run better when it's full of fuel. So with that baby cranked, I was then able to turn on the fan that I cunningly found upstairs on the roof of the internally built ensuite, which I so manfully demolished. And I might link that video here. So I had my fan blowing, I had both doors open because all of this paint, we're assuming underneath the modern layers, is going to be lead-based, so very toxic, particularly when you're burning it. I had both doors open. It was a breezy day, so there was lots of ventilation, and I didn't get a headache, so that's a plus. And so now, house lovers, the somewhat tedious task of finishing it. So I think I have done maybe a third, and that took 3 hours. So let's say it's going to take another 6 hours to complete the front. And then, house lovers, we have the reverse side to do. Oh, what fun. As suspected, it's a lovely Oregon pine underneath, but such things were always meant to be painted or finished. You were never expecting to see the original pine finish. As I mentioned, in the 1980s, it was the fashion to strip all of this stuff and sand it back and wax it. Not what we're going to do. Once I've finished heat gunning it, I'm then going to give it a gentle sand, so particularly along these edges, just to clean up the gunk from all those crevices. And also, there is still a lot of toffee-like shellac, which is sort of crusty and burnt, clinging to the edge, so I've got to sand all that off. I'll use an orbital sander for that, and then it will be ready for us to paint it again. It is my new least favourite job. You'd often see such divides in a hallway of a house to essentially separate the front part from the back part. The back part being where the business of the house would have gone on, the staff, the kitchens, etc. And it's pretty much similar here. Although this wasn't a grand house, so the back part of the house also includes the major staircase, but it also includes, if we can see, which you can there, this across here, which is the old bell board. So whenever anyone rang the front doorbell, ding-a-ling-a-ling, in pure Downton Abbey fashion, the bell would ring there, and all the pulleys and wires that operated are still running under the floor and go out to the front door. I don't think we're going to reinstate the bell system. And another bit of feedback from one of my videos about stripping was the use of the stripping product that I used in the hallway, which was the paste with the paper that you leave 24 hours and then you pull off. It worked incredibly well. But now an old friend of mine contacted me to talk about her experience of renovating a house, God, 10 or 15 years ago in Western Australia. It was an early Victorian house again, which had wallpaper and then paint in the hallway. And she was working with some Italian specialists, one of whom was Venetian, who said, you don't need to use all that expensive toxic paint stripper. You can just use a chux dipped in water. House lovers, I see the raised eyebrow and the rolled eyeballs because I felt the same. How can a wet chux strip off 150 layers of paint? Well, according to the Venetian building restorer who restored buildings in Venice, which would have had a lot more paint on than our humble Victorian things in Australia, he would just apply a wet chux to the wall, leave it for don't know how long, but let's assume 12 hours or overnight, and it would seep through and then you just pull it off. So house lovers, observe, let us experiment. Regardez, one chux and a convenient bucket of water. Let us put the chux in the water and get it very wet. I did wonder, how does the chux stay to the wall? But let's see what happens. Okay, so this is very wet and I am going to do that. Oh well, it seems to have stuck. It just has to stick. Okay, watch this space. I'm going to come back tomorrow and do a special follow-up to see if anything has happened other than it's just dried out and fallen off. So there we are, house lovers. There is my chux experiment, which I do not have great hopes for. I am just sharing that with you. Next week, I've got a chimney sweep coming, which sounds so Dickensian. And you know, when I was ringing around to try and find someone who's a chimney sweep, I was just too embarrassed to say the word chimney sweep because it sounded so Dickensian, as though I was looking for some 8-year-old child to go up the chimney. Anyway, Matthew, the chimney sweep, is coming next week, so hopefully he won't mind being on camera and I can have a chat to him about the state of chimneys in Melbourne 2020, a COVID chimney special. But until then, you are going to have to wait to see if the chux experiment works. So thank you, Catherine, for sharing the little insight about the Venetian master craftsman who used this technique. Yet to be convinced. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking and asking anything that I can't answer because I am an amateur struggling my way through the restoration of this house. I'll see you next week with chux updates and hopefully a chimney sweep special. But until then, take care wherever you are. I hope things are okay. The roller coaster of COVID keeps going up and down. Luckily for Melbourne, we're down right now. So we're about to be released back into the world, which I'm very happy about. But might not be the case for you. So take care and I will see you next week and we can see if that chux stuck to the wall.